You want to click record? Okay, so hello officially everyone, and welcome to today's online event brought to you by Matchboard in partnership with the BPO Council of Fiji and the Australian government-backed Market Development Facility. Our event is entitled Fiji, the Australian HR and recruitment industry's best kept secret, and will run for 1 hour. During this time, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in the conversation around the opportunity to extend your operations to Fiji through outsourced partnerships. We'll be kicking off with 2 short case studies, followed by a panel discussion with 2 outsourcing leaders based in Fiji. And to conclude, we'll have some time for audience questions. So think of your questions as we go along and feel free at any point to pop those questions in the chat room so you don't forget them. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sharon Melamed, Managing Director of Matchboard, and I'll introduce our first speaker shortly. But just before I do, and while we're waiting for a few more, to join some quick housekeeping items. So first of all, we are recording this event. Secondly, if you have internet issues, just use your hotspot on your mobile or dial in with the phone number and passcode, which you'll find in the calendar invitation. And finally, could I just ask you to check that you're on mute until question time to prevent outside noise for our speakers. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Simon Gibson at Protech. Protech is a leading Australian recruitment company, and Simon is going to present Protech's journey outsourcing a range of HR and recruitment processes in Fiji. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks very much, Sharon. I'll just share my presentation for you all. Hopefully that's coming through if you. Yep, perfect. Yes, we've been asked today to share with you about Protech's journey with our Pacific office and outsourcing some of our tasks to Fiji. So to give a little bit of background for those people who don't know, Protech, we're a national labour hire and recruitment provider, specialising in the provision of semi-skilled, skilled, technical trades and professional personnel. We were founded in 2006 in Brisbane, and we remain one of the largest privately owned recruitment companies in Australia with turnover in excess of $300 million. We have a national footprint with 22 office locations all over the country, which gives us a true national footprint to service a range of clients. We have a workforce in excess of 300 field employees out and about on any given day. It's slightly less at the moment with some of the unfortunate shutdowns that are going on around the country, but nonetheless, we've still got a really big group of people we look after. At Protech, we really consider one of our key product differentiators within the market is our belief in quality people every time. What this means in practice is that we've got a really rigorous onboarding process to deliver a consistently high quality product, which can be a massive challenge when your product is people. We know that in comparison to the market, we spend a lot more time onboarding our candidates and have a higher level required to become a Protech field staff member. So the challenge with having any process is being able to administer it in an efficient and cost-effective manner without compromising its purpose. And I guess given that how complex our process is was one of the drivers in why we look to outsource some of those duties. So for Protech, we've seen a really rapid growth. We were only a $50 million company 6 years ago. We started the outsourcing journey about 3.5 years ago. So, we're about 200 million at that stage when we first looked at outsourcing. And really one of the challenges when a business grows from a really small business to a true medium-sized business is the IT systems and infrastructure often don't cope with that growth. So what really developed was a very administration-heavy process driven by a low-tech system. Which we work, as a lot of people know, that there's not a lot of off-the-shelf products you can buy, especially in the blue-collar labour hire space, that make it very easy, especially when our process is quite different to the market. A lot of the work we did was very repeatable and process-driven. We do a very similar process every time we do onboard a candidate. And spending money on internal resources that were inefficient. We had skilled recruiters scanning items, uploading entries into our database. And this really deviates away from the high payoff activities of them talking to candidates or clients. And I guess lastly, a really big driver of outsourcing, especially to a lot of the outsourcing destinations, is really around that cost, being cost effective. So for us, Fiji in terms of numbers is anywhere from 30 to 50% cheaper than having a local resource doing a similar role. Why Fiji? I think there's some really key factors that make Fiji a very attractive place for outsourcing, especially for us here at Protech. The availability of skilled talent in Fiji is a massive one for us. There's a lot of transferable skills into that recruitment space from the hospitality sector, especially in customer service and things like that. The vast majority of candidates applying for roles that we had on in that outsourcing space were university educated. So whereas we're in Australia, we try and bring on someone in an administration role who potentially, has only finished school and had done a few jobs. In Fiji, even the people applying for an admin role to upload paperwork to a system have HR degrees and things like that. So really well-educated people who are applying. Fijians' English was at a really high level in comparison to other outsourcing destinations, which is a massive plus for us, especially now. Delve into it a little bit later. We have people who are talking on the phone to our clients and our candidates and things like that, and more often than not, they don't even know that they're in Fiji. So I think that's a really big plus for us. The time zone of Fiji really suited the majority of our business, which is about 60 to 70% East Coast based in terms of volume of work and also the volume of internal staff that work. But they, I guess, with our Pacific office also offered the flexibility of extended work times in Fiji to make sure that we did actually have full national coverage of staff across all of Australia and its time zones. Advantage for us being Brisbane based, that's where our head office is. The ability for staff to travel from Brisbane to Fiji to do training and setup was a really big one for us. A lot more effective than going to some of the other Asian destinations. Also really great benefit of Fiji. I know for those who've been there, it's also a great holiday destination. So a great way to go and visit the team and then tack on a work holiday or something after that. We've certainly had a few people utilize that, which is also a great perk of Fiji. But lastly, it's great for us to be able to bring team members over to Australia, which we've done in the past as well for national conferences and things like that. It's not a huge cost to be able to get someone over to Fiji in either time or dollars. And then lastly, the other one there is the Fijians see a role, even in an admin role with Protech, as a true long-term white-collar role with, we've had them describe, it's like working for a Microsoft or a Google or something like that. That's how they compare it to when working for, we're only, in our minds, we're a little Aussie company just battling away. But in the perception in Fiji is we're a really big company and people want to work for us and have a long-term career option, not come in and get bored after 6 months. So I'll touch on some of the benefits of that later as well. How do we set it up? We really started small. We started with just an administration support team. They were just taking data entry aspect away from recruiters. It was really just scanning documents, uploading it to the system, putting notes into our system, things like that. We had a really clearly outlined and documented process. Again, it was really straightforward. The other thing we did is we set up a ticketing system on the Fresh Desk platform. This allowed clear recording of tickets coming in and the type of tickets being utilised by the onshore team. And we could establish SLA times for each type of ticket to ensure items were being addressed in a timely manner. And we'd also monitor each consultant in Fiji for output to make sure that they were all productive. And then lastly, once we'd had it all set up, all of those pieces in place, we had actually had our operations management team travel over to our Pacific office to be able to then do some face-to-face training, set up and everything to make sure we were all up and running. And I guess the exciting part for us is, we started small, but we realized pretty quickly that what we could do was really kind of endless. So, we set up our support team through our Pacific office just to remove the admin burden that recruiters felt. We did this initially with 2 team members. We did that for about 6 months to get things up and running, iron out the kinks and everything like that. But then we realized there was team members who were keen to do more than just the basic stuff. So we started adding on basic recruitment tasks to one of the team members over there. So that was things like screening of job ads, phoning candidates, shortlisting them, doing reference checks with clients, passing leads and things back into our consultant teams. And we began to see more and more capability and capacity growing within that team. So then we added a third team member. And then from there, we actually were able to split the team into two people just doing more the administration, which was the kind of the core function of our Fiji team. But then we moved one of the team members into a full end-to-end recruitment role. So they were operating in a recruitment role no different to someone would be in one of our local Australian offices. The advantage being is we could utilize their resources wherever the demand was at the time. Given a lot of our work is project driven, we can shuffle them around as needed. So from there, we've continued to grow that. So we actually now have 3 team members. We kind of bring them into our admin team. They get to learn our systems, our processes and things like that. And then we move them into what we call our operations team. So in that side of things, we've now got 3 gentlemen who work in our operations team, in our recruitment hub full time. We have 2 administrators who are still doing those ticket-based items. I guess the final area that we utilize Team Fiji for is what we call in our translation team. Due to the growth in our business, we had to implement a payroll solution that had integration issues with our CRM. And in order to minimize our disruption to our front end business, we have a team in Fiji that ensures the data in our payroll system is kept in sync with our front end system. Unfortunately, this has been a very manual process and a much lengthier process to rectify than initially thought. Without the support of Fiji, we wouldn't have been able to do this in a cost-effective manner. I think we initially set down to rectify the integration issues. I think we had a 3-month timeline. And unfortunately, like all good IT things, that was 3 years ago. And I think we're finally getting to a point where we're solving that. And again, it's that flexibility of being able to ramp up in a cost-effective way was a really big win for us to be able to deliver that. So overall now we've got a team of 10 in Fiji in our Pacific office. And it's great to see their capacity and capability growing. So lastly, I wanted to touch on was how do we measure performance? I think it's always a question, as a real driver of Team Fiji from certainly the financial people in my business is how are we measuring the success? How are we measuring what we're getting out and we're getting what we're paying for? So for us, we've, through the Fresh Desk system, are able to monitor the SLAs that have been implemented to make sure we're getting it in a timely fashion. To give you an idea of ticket volume, we've had 15,000 tickets processed this year. That's just by the 2 consultants in the admin team. And that ticket can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes is probably about a rough timeline. So it's a huge volume of work. And I, anecdotally can say that I think we would struggle to have that level of commitment we would have in 2 people doing that in Australia full time, where the girls in Team Fiji just absolutely pump it out. In terms of SLAs, we've got a first response SLA of 90% and a resolution SLA of 93%. And given the nature of our tickets, sometimes having to actually get in touch with reference checks and things like that, that's a really big success for us. Human performance is also a large factor, and one of the key metrics we track within that is staff turnover. And I'm really proud to say that in the 3 years we've been using our Pacific office, we've had only 1 staff member leave. So if we average that out, it's less than 1%. Now, in comparison to the rest of our business onshore, that sits at about 15%, which even for the larger recruitment companies, if they're under 30%, that's good. So we've got a good turnover within our onshore team, but it's really, really great within Team Fiji. Some real drivers of success and of what have made our journey so successful, just outside of those pure performance factors, is really having the buy-in from our local teams. It is a journey to get the local teams to be able to buy in that, hey, yes, we've got people. No, you don't see them every day, that it's video calls and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they can't do everything that an onshore resource can. And you've got to build that trust, and we've certainly done that over time. I think the other real key for us is at Protech, we don't see Team Fiji as a team of contractors who work in an office and we just send them stuff and off we go. Even sitting here, I talk about them as Team Fiji. They're a team that are in my reporting lines and I manage, and I consider them to be people who work for Protech. The fact that they're paid by another entity in Fiji really isn't how they're viewed within our business. And I think that's really key. They feel part of our team, they feel engaged. And I think that's a massive key to the overall success. And I think it also flows into again, what makes it successful is that they do need to be managed and looked after like they are internal staff. You can't, it's not just a set and forget, send them work, or, if there's a team leader over there, send it to them, they'll sort everything else out. They report to a manager here in Brisbane. We have reporting lines that they're all part of. So I think that's, again, a driver for them to be successful. And lastly, I think it's really about working with the outsourcing partner. So we work closely with Brad in our Pacific office. And it's a real true partnership. We manage the day-to-day, and we do performance manage if we have issues, which we don't have a lot of, but then also heavily rely on Brad and his team to be able to then deal with if we do have issues of a personal nature or things like that, to give us the Fijian perspective, because there are cultural differences, of course. And I think that having a really open and transparent relationship there, again, has really been a huge driver of the success for our business. And lastly, I just thought I'd share some great happy snaps of our team. That's not all of them. We need some updated pictures because we have grown. So, the three gentlemen on the right, David on the left of that picture, has been with us since day one. So he'll be coming up to 4 years at the end of this year with our business, and he's definitely the real cornerstone. So no, it's a fantastic team, and thanks for having the opportunity to share a little bit more about our journey.
Thank you so much, Simon. I've found that really insightful, and I really appreciate that you were so transparent and generous in sharing your learnings there. If you have any questions for Simon, as I mentioned earlier, you can pop them in the chat room and we'll come back to them later. But for now, I'm going to introduce our second case study speaker, who is Miles Block of BDE Group. He is the founder of the company, and he's going to present BDE's journey finding and managing talent in Fiji across a wide range of roles for an iconic Australian brand, who Miles will now reveal. Over to you, Miles.
All right, thanks, Sharon, and sorry for the delay while I got that presentation up, and I think you should now be able to all see it. All right, great, thanks. All right, so I'm excited to be able to share some of this with you all today. Most of you will all know who Lowe's is. They're a really iconic Australian retailer. They've got over 200 stores across Australia, and how BDE Group fits into the picture is that we are a consultancy and project management company, and we help Australian companies set up and manage their remote offshore teams. So whilst most companies will deal directly with an offshore partner, and they do that quite successfully, occasionally a company doesn't have either the internal experience or capacity to set that up, or they just want some additional support on the Australian side to help them prepare for shifting to a split team. And that's where BDE Group steps in, and that's what we've done in this case with Lowe's. So we help them plan, procure, implement, and then ongoingly manage this team that I'm about to share about. Okay, so with the Lowe's team, so we started with one team in a single role, and that was coming up to 3 years ago. And over that time, we've grown that out to being multiple departments and multiple team members. We've got 20 staff now, and in the Lowe's team, and they're covering off things like the head office reception, the customer service call center. So if you were to call Lowe's today, you'll be talking to our people over in Fiji. We are doing debt collection for some of their credit clients. Their online store, so we staff their online store support team. So both over the telephone, but also, emails and things like that. So if you have an issue or a question with your online order, you'll be coming through to our team in Fiji. We staff them with auditors and quality assurance team members that work in the finance team at Lowe's, and credit assessors for their credit customers. So they have in-store credit product that's similar to Afterpay, and that they run themselves or own themselves, and we run that from that team in Fiji, including doing the credit assessments and decisioning. Okay, so we started small, got one team in, and then over time we've really expanded that out to covering most. We've got some support happening in most areas of Lowe's with the Fiji team. Why we chose Fiji. So Lowe's has been around for over 120 years in Australia. They're very true blue Aussie. They're an excellent employer. They're the Retail Employer of the Year 3 years in a row. So they needed an offshore destination that was going to be able to fit within their culture, and was going to be able to represent their brand with their Australian customers. As well as an important part of Lowe's customer base are older Australian customers who would find it more challenging to overcome communication barriers with, with a more traditional offshore outsourcing destination. So they needed people that were going to be flexible, personable, and empathetic. And we didn't want to leave the Lowe's customers with any sort of frustrating overseas call center experiences. So that's why we chose Fiji. And then in Fiji, we chose to partner with an outsourcing company called Grey Mouse. So Grey Mouse has been operating for over 15 years. And as a smaller sized outsourcing company, we felt that they were best placed to accommodate the bespoke solution that we were looking for. They could offer us the flexibility and what we were trying to achieve with setting up the call center, the offshore destination for Lowe's. So that's why we chose Fiji and Grey Mouse. In particular, the things that we were looking for that we liked is the cultural similarities. So Fijian sporting teams compete against ours. The Fijians watch some of our TV shows, their news reports on events that are happening in Australia, and tourism is a big part of the Fijian economy. So it's really dominated by Australian and New Zealand visitors. So the Fijian people are really accustomed to Australians and accustomed to the Australian culture, and it's familiar to them. Okay. As well as they're just, as a culture, they're just naturally really warm and friendly. They're accommodating and flexible, and ingrained in their culture is a real team or community, motivation. You know, they're historically a tribal nation, and so they really, we thought they'd really fit well with what we were trying to achieve. Okay. Their accents. So as Simon mentioned, the accent in Fiji is really, they do have an accent, but it's easily understood. It's not grinding at all for the Australian ear. And in some senses, we joked that we made their call center more Australian when we moved it to Fiji, because just like any call center in Australia, there's people with an accent. And we found that the accent in Fiji was clearer than the accent in most Australian call centers. So, and there's some reasons for that. So the schooling in Fiji is conducted in English. So all our staff have been speaking English all their lives. Business and government operate in English. And most importantly for us, because a lot of the stuff was written, our team are responding, they're generating reports, they're responding to customers and staff via email and chat and things like that. It was important to go somewhere that they were really well versed in UK English like Australia uses. We didn't want to annoy Lowe's customers with the funny spellings that America uses, which is a lot of the outsourcing destinations in the world are based on US English. But that was important to us. The other thing is their education and talent pool. So the Fijian people are highly educated. So most of the staff that we've hired are university graduates. They consider working for Lowe's and working with us as you know, a prestigious job and a career job. These are professional people. So even some of the more junior roles that we have, we find that these are people that have gone into a career of working in a call center, for example. Whereas every call center I've managed in Australia, everybody's on their way to somewhere else. Whereas these people have really gone and studied. They've gone and studied so that they could go into this style of career, and they see it as that. And so that was important to us. Having an outsourcing industry focused on Australia. So Australia and New Zealand is the focus for most of the outsourcing businesses in Fiji, and that's certainly the case with Grey Mouse, who we work with on this team. So so rather than Australia being an afterthought as a market, all of Grey Mouse's attention was on the Australian market, and so that's why we chose Fiji and chose Grey Mouse. The other thing was their HR systems and laws. So even though Grey Mouse take care of all the HR management on our behalf, it was really important to Lowe's that the destination we choose have robust and quality HR and OH&S protections for their staff. The last thing they needed was something that they're getting so right in Australia to fall out in their overseas team. So Fiji's HR standards and laws are really similar to Australia's. It seems that most of the legislation they've modelled off ours in Australia. So the employees are really well taken care of, and it's within a framework that Lowe's HR department and management can understand. They don't need to, Grey Mouse manages it all, but where the HR department in Australia wants to understand what's going on over there, they're able to really clearly understand it. The other thing is it's really easy to travel both ways between Fiji and Australia. So that we've had management from Australia travel over to Fiji every 3 to 4 months, but it's also meant that it's been easy for the Fijian senior staff to come and work in head office in Sydney with Lowe's when and as needed. And we've had no shortage of volunteers. We've had no shortage of volunteers from the Lowe's team to travel to Fiji office. They're all clamoring to go and visit the Fiji office. We have had some challenges along the way, although they've all been able to be solved. We've so far not come up against a challenge that we couldn't overcome fairly easily. The biggest one, particularly early on, was breaking down the stereotype of of overseas call centers and teams. So historically, outsourcing was for really simple, procedurized tasks. And over time, the outsourcing industry's evolved, and now they're really highly skilled professional people that are really on par with their Australian counterparts. So it was difficult initially for management and the Australian team in Lowe's to picture things that could get done by the overseas team. I think if anything, they sort of underestimated what the team would be capable of. And we saw over the first couple of months them really opening up and seeing like there's so much more that the team's capable of, which is why it's grown over the years and widened to so many more different areas. Uniting the Australian team and the remote team. So they started off just sort of emailing the team and doing things like that. And I think Simon talked about as well, like really gelling the two teams together was beneficial. And so we introduced having regular video meetings, and so that people can sort of bring up some of the more water cooler conversations that you would have with your local team. much like people are experiencing at the moment with everybody working at home for COVID, is, you know, how we can bring those teams together and talk about the things that you might not bring up in a large formal meeting. The other thing was pay rises. So we've gotten used to in Australia not having our pays go up very often. It's not the case in Fiji, and so the impact financially of those pay rises is really minimal. So in this team, the salaries are about 20% of what the equivalent would be in Australia. So so pay rises aren't very impactful, but it's important to budget for them and make sure that both you and your team in Fiji understand what is happening there, and so you can prepare for it. And the other one's being caught by assumptions. So initially, some of the other Lowe's Australian people were used to being able to quickly change something on the spot and walk down to someone's office and execute a change on the spot. We found that there's sometimes assumptions like, oh, hey, we need them to do this, so they're going to need this piece of equipment. Sure, in Australia, you might be able to get that shipped in overnight. Over there, it might take a little bit longer. It might take a week to source something. So we found planning ahead and communicating and getting the Australian team communicating in advance of these changes meant that we were able to really smoothly execute things. Okay. Some unexpected outcomes or benefits that we've had. So our complaints from customers and internal teams at Lowe's has actually gone down. We set about to not have them get any worse. We've actually found that they've gone down, and I don't have exact metrics on it, but the management at Lowe's keeps talking to me about how happy they are and how much the complaints have gone down compared to prior to us moving it over to Fiji. The productivity's increased. So one example of that is our credit assessment team. They've been able to process double the number of credit applications they were before without increasing the team. So they've certainly kept up with the Australian counterparts, if anything exceeded them. And despite initial skepticism from the Australian colleagues, they were the team were really widely accepted, appreciated, and respected by the entire organisation. So we'd set out for that to happen over, you know, a 12-month period. We were hoping that they'd be really well integrated and accepted, but we found it went much quicker. Within the first couple of months, they were working together. They were working together in an important part of the team. And as Simon mentioned, staff turnover. We're in a similar boat. In that team, we've had 2 people resign over the last 3 years. One of them resigned about 4 or 5 days into the job, worked out it wasn't what they wanted to do. And the second one resigned to follow their studies, and they've actually, as of a couple of days ago, just returned back after finishing their studies. So the people that are there, we haven't had to retrain replacements constantly, which has been a massive benefit. Okay, so just to recap on a couple of the things that we've learned, were important in that team was to have video meetings with the team, including remote team members in newsletters, announcements, and celebrations. So we've done that both ways so that people really feel as colleagues. Avoid relating to your offshore team as a supplier or vendor. Those team members are part of your team, even though they're technically employed by someone else. And communicate with your outsourcing partner in advance of any changes. Okay. All right, so that was just a very quick overview of what's been a really great 3-year journey with Lowe's. But if you do have any further questions, as Sharon said, put them in the chat or reach out to, if something comes up afterwards, reach out to Sharon, or you're welcome to look me up on LinkedIn if you've got particular questions that I can answer. I'm really happy to share from our experience. Okay. Thank you.
Miles.
Back to you, Sharon.
Sure, that was a great presentation. Some common themes that I actually picked up across both of the case studies there. were the reduction in cost, an obvious one, reduction in staff turnover, reduction in complaints, and an increase in productivity, which is some pretty amazing business outcomes for Australian businesses. So thank you so much. Right now, I'm going to actually launch a poll. And we would like to know from everyone who's on this session, where are you on your outsourcing journey? So please vote. So perhaps you don't offshore today, but you might be open to exploring. You already outsource and have an offshore team. You have outsourcing projects in progress or something else. It would be great to just get a few more votes in before I close the poll in 10 seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gonna close the poll. And I'll share the results with you actually. So interestingly, in equal numbers, we have people who don't offshore but are open to exploring it, as well as people that already have an offshore team, and then a couple of other ones. So thank you for participating in that poll. I hope that's gone off your screens now. Okay, so now it's my great pleasure to introduce our two panelists who are joining us live from Fiji. We have in Nadi Brad Russell, who is Managing Director of our Pacific office. And we have joining us from Suva, Fayaz Khan, who is a General Manager at Grey Mouse. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you everyone on the group today in the webinar.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Sorry, I was just going to say nice to meet you all. Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Simon and Miles, for some really good updates there.
Great. So Brad, I actually would like to ask the first question to you. We heard from both presenters just now that they had a really great experience compared to onshore in Australia in terms of the very low staff turnover in Fiji, in fact, single digit annualized attrition. Could you share perhaps the reasons for that, why you think staff turnover may be so low over there? I'll just ask you to go off mute.
Yeah, sure, Sharon. So it was touched on by either Simon or Miles, I forget now, but one of the things, it might have been both actually, but one of the highlights I see with why that happens is when someone takes on a role in a contact center or an offshore outsourcing office, they're treating it as a white collar job and a career move. You know, particularly, you know, obviously the tourism industry is quite strong. Well, it's not at the moment with COVID, but was quite strong. And so that's often the choice of job. And you know, once we get the employees onto working for a BPO situation, they are really taking that on as a career move. So it's a long term. Normally, once you've got them there, they know that, you know, they can move up in their career. Importantly, they learn the systems of the overseas customers. I think Simon referred to it before as being the Google of Australia. So, because obviously a lot of the companies here are smaller. So when they're working for bigger companies in Australia via the BPOs here, they're really getting access to systems that, you know, they've never seen before potentially. So they are learning, and it's all, Fijians are very hungry to learn and to get certificates, to do courses. And I just think, you know, that then linked with the commitment that we get from our clients to treat them as both Miles and Simon said, to treat the team members as their own team members, that really gives them that kind of feel of, you know, they really belong and they can move forward in their career. Obviously, employment here it's a highly valued thing. You know, there are lots of unemployment in Fiji, and particularly now with the collapse of tourism at the moment. So when people do get a job and it's a nice workplace and they're working in an executive style environment, they don't normally move on. So I think that's probably the key points I would suggest.
Okay, just you touched on, you know, a lot of jobs lost because of the tourism industry being decimated through the pandemic. What is the availability of graduates who have some HR experience or have studied HR in some way at university? Is there an available pool of graduates lining up every time you post a job?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, Sharon, because it's probably, I'd suggest somewhere between 30% of any job that we put out into the marketplace. So it may not even be HR related, but when the applications come in, you'll see on their CVs that there's some sort of HR study that's been done or degree. And that can, so you're talking, you know, there's potentially thousands of people out there that have the ability to be able to jump into a job in a HR or recruitment level. And as you know, like there's a lot of smaller businesses here, so they don't necessarily need a team of 10 or 20 HR staff members. So, you know, so there's lots of availability of HR trained people without the jobs here. So I believe there's a huge talent pool available.
Excellent. I'd like to now address the elephant in the room, which everyone can guess is COVID-19. Obviously, we see a bit about that on TV in terms of what's going on in Fiji. So I was wondering, Fayaz, if I could turn to you and ask you to give the audience a bit of a view on the response of the government and the BPO industry to the pandemic, and have your overseas clients been affected in any way?
Okay, thanks, Sharon. And I think this is something that I think most of the attendees today would be interested to know about how Fiji has, you know, like responded to COVID, and especially the outsourcing industry. So I think, and I think just to go in there, I think firstly, we would like to thank our government as well of today here, that they have been really supportive of this outsourcing industry. And really one of the main key things that we saw was that they integrated us as being part of the essential services here in Fiji. So really that what that meant for us was that you know, like our operations were really not interrupted during, you know, like even if there were lockdowns being placed, or if there were curfews being placed. So we managed to get passes to you know, like shuttle our staff to and from office. And then on top of that, then they went ahead and developed some COVID safe protocols as well for essential businesses that were operating to follow, to be able to, you know, like keep the team members safe as well, which was actually a requirement for any business to operate in this pandemic, and which the outsourcing council members have adapted to, you know, very diligently. And that has actually enabled us to, you know, like continue delivering our services as it was pre-COVID, without impacting any of our clients in Australia or any country globally that we have been delivering to. And I think really we didn't had to go into work from home for long because of this support and changes that were, you know, like so swiftly handled by the relevant authorities to you know, like protect and continue continuous of this outsourcing industry, actually, because knowing how relevant it is for them to be able to deliver, because, you know, like the clients are based outside Fiji.
Thank you, Fayaz. What is, if you have just at the tip of your tongue there, the vaccination rate in Fiji right now? Do you have stats you could share?
Do you want me to jump into
yes,
that?
Brad, yeah, you can, no problem.
So that, yeah, just to give you an idea, that's and the government has done, as Fayez said, they've done an amazing job to support our industry, and they see our industry as a huge growth opportunity for Fiji. One of the let's say get out of this situation of COVID is all around vaccination rate. We have a very, very high vaccination rate. In fact, it's going up 1, 2, 3% every day. So we're currently at the eligible population. We're currently at 89% of the first dose.
Wow.
And you know, certain areas of Fiji are higher. Like we're talking, you know, over here in Nandi, it's 95%. So we're pretty well, you know, on target. And then the second dose, we're currently at 33%. But the government just recently, very cleverly, I believe anyway, introduced that you needed to be vaccinated if you are to enter the workplace. And that kicked in from the 1st of August for the first dose of the vaccine, and the second dose has to be administered by the 1st of November. And that really has helped those levels get up. And so at the moment, we're on target to, when we get into November, we should be, you know, at 100% across both first and second dose. And at that point in time, we're hoping that, you know, things will obviously get back to very much normality. You know, we're hoping that the borders will then open, so business associates will be able, and our clients will be able to come over and visit their teams. In some cases, meet their teams in real person, because obviously we've had some good growth over the COVID period, and it's all been done online. So it's quite exciting to see what's going to happen at the end of the year. But yeah, the vaccination rate has certainly been very, very positive for Fiji.
That is quite astounding, those statistics, and very promising indeed. And I guess that's one of the differentiators of Fiji versus some of the other offshore countries that may be more commonly considered by Australian businesses when it comes to outsourcing offshore, like the Philippines or India, which definitely lag behind those stats. And so that, I guess, brings me to the next thing I thought we could talk about, which is the value proposition of Fiji. And perhaps Fayaz, I'll come back to you. So why, if you could maybe give me a few salient points of why Fiji should be the choice of outsourcing destination for Australian businesses versus other markets.
Okay, so thanks once again, Sharon. I think this was to some extent kind of, I think, presented as well by our two presenters today. And, you know, like some of the common ones I think we would get there is, you know, like, first of all, I think the proximity of Fiji to Australia and New Zealand. And then, you know, like we are very close, and our time zones are very similar as well, where New Zealand actually is you know, like on a similar time zone as us, while we are about 2 hours ahead of Australia. Despite, I mean, like it changes a little bit during daylight savings in different countries, but I think it still works out really well. And then, of course, as said by the presenters, you know, like we have a natural service culture that, you know, is Fiji very well known for, and the cultural closeness because of, you know, like the relationship that Fiji has had with its close neighbors, Australia and New Zealand, over the years, and then the cultural closeness that has developed, especially through sports and tourism and other, you know, like I'd say probably diplomatic relationships that we have had. So I think that has actually also, you know, like meant a lot for companies in Australia and New Zealand, as you know, like they somehow they know Fiji, you know, like for one or the other reason. And of course, then we kind of have similar skill sets that we can provide at a very cost-effective rate to Australia, because kind of our school curriculum and you know, like study guides are set up following the Australian and New Zealand studying materials as well.
Fantastic. Just before we jump to audience questions, Brad, did you have anything to add to that in terms of the Fiji value proposition?
Yeah, look, I probably the one that the highlight is that Fijians share the spirit of Australia. And, you know, being a fellow Australian, been living here for nearly 9 years now, but, you know, I see that on a day-to-day basis out in the office. And I think that's really, really important, particularly when you're integrating your team in Australia with your Fiji team. You know, that all of those things that have been mentioned about language and all of that closeness to Australia really means a lot, and you see that come out very, very openly and easily. The other thing, which is always a bit of a standout, is the eagerness to do extra hours. You know, obviously in Australia, a lot of people want to do lesser hours. We're in Fiji, and Simon can certainly certainly agree with that, because like some of his team, or the Protech team, have been doing amazing, particularly when pay rates changed, you know, from one financial year to the other. You're talking about overtime that I've never ever seen before. So that happy employee, happy client, you know. So so they're always eager to do extra hours. And you know, we touched on the travel side of things. You know, the fact that you can mix in a normal situation once the borders are reopened again, the fact that you can mix that you know, business trip with a pleasure, you know, leisure trip at the same time is a real highlight, not just for the company owners, but it's also great for, you know, senior executives or management, or the team members that you bring over to Fiji, because it can be used as a bit of an incentive, you know, from that point of view. So and costs have been touched on briefly. So to give you just a rough guideline, you're talking around about AUD anywhere between $10 and $15 per hour. So it's massive drop of what you would pay in Australia. And as you've heard from both Miles and Simon, you're going to get the same output, or possibly even better output than what you would in Australia. So there's obviously some really good cost savings there for you as well.
Fantastic. So $10 to $15, Brad, if you could just clarify, that is not only wages, but that also includes all the payroll processing, the management, the housing of the staff, the computer, the
Correct,
telephone,
yeah.
Everything. Okay.
That's fully loaded. The only additional cost you're going to pay for that is overtime, and that's at your discretion and your or the client's approval. So you know,
yep.
it's a great way of knowing what your monthly costs are, and yeah, it's certainly a huge saving.
Yeah, $10 to $15 is quite amazing.
Yeah, I think Sharon, just from our experience also, just to add on, you know, like when you have overtime, for us at here, we have Greymouse, we have the flexibility actually that, you know, like sometimes, you know, like you have to pull in extra hours just, you know, like to meet some deadlines. But, you know, like when you have easy days, you can easily offset those hours as well. So you have that flexibility as well, where you really don't have to spend more money to pay people for overtime, but you can, you know, like take it out on the easy days.
Fantastic. Okay, so we better wrap up the panel discussion. Thank you both. And see if the audience has any questions. So you can either type in the question in a chat room, or you can unmute yourself and ask it directly. So if anyone has a question, please go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I have one. Thanks, guys. That was really, really informative. I was just wondering what you think it will be like with staffing when the tourism industry comes back to life after kind of COVID and these vaccinations. Like, do you see people possibly going back to that, or do you think they'll stay in this sort of office environment, or how would that affect, you know, staffing and resourcing, if we were to look at that?
I'm happy to take the lead on that, Sharon and Faiz, if you like.
Brad, I think you'd be the best one to answer, because you're based in the tourism town, you know.
Correct. Yeah. So thanks, Sarah, for that question, and it's a very, very relevant question, and it gets asked a lot by clients. And I spent 30 plus years in the tourism industry prior to breaking into the BPO industry. So hence why I'm based in Nandi. So to give you an idea, in particularly for the West, so I'll talk about in the Nandi area, which is the major area where the tourism workers are. You're talking about households that were wiped out of jobs. Okay, so it was, you know, mum, dad, uncle, cousin, everyone who was working in the tourism industry or related to the tourism industry. And what comes out in those questions when we're doing the interview process, because we obviously asked that question about going back to the tourism industry, they all have the same. They've said, no, we've made a decision as a family that we won't all go back again, because we've learned from that. We need to be diverse as a family. So if we get a job, you know, in the BPO industry, we're not going to be looking at going back to the tourism industry.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we do have a question in the chat room. So is it possible to start with 1 or 2 people, or do you need a full complement of a team? So I think if people want to test the waters, is it possible just to have 1 or 2 people to get a feel for it, gain confidence before they start expanding their team? Fayaz?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think a very good question, and it depends on I think the size of the BPO industry you are dealing with, but generally, like knowing the BPO industry here and being a representative there, I think most of us are very flexible, and some of us are not even I mean, like flexible enough to start off with ad hoc and project basis hours as well, and then you can move up from there, like to 1 or to 2, and then you can like climb up the ladder. So definitely, yes, you have that opportunity to like build your team from 1 or 2.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question in a chat room. Would love to know their thoughts on the culture with 24/7 work, for example, working US times. Do any of your staff work during the night, or could they?
I think I'll jump in there, Sharon. I think I have about 2 staff that were working for US, and then there's like lately there's another 2 that has started delivering for the US client. So like it's 24/7. Yeah. So there's no problem with that.
Yeah, most of the BPO operators here operate 24/7.
Yeah, and with keeping in mind the safety and security of the staff as well, we provide transportation to and from work.
Sorry, Sharon, I think your microphone's not working.
Sharon, maybe you are on mute or something?
No, it's not showing mute.
Sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, can now.
Yeah, something very bizarre happened then. Yes, so the question was, can you accommodate project-based work, or does it need to be a permanent team?
We can accommodate both. I mean, like speaking from Grandma's point of view, yes, we accommodate both.
Okay.
Yeah, again, most can do project and permanent. And often what can happen is you can start with project and then it moves into a permanent role.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question, and we'll have to wrap up soon. Which are the typical companies using outsourcing services in Fiji? Thanks, Ed, for the question. And I guess that refers to the sorts of industries, the sorts of size of companies. Do they come in all shapes and sizes in Fiji? What's the typical client for you?
They certainly do. If I talk from our Pacific office point of view, we currently have 14 clients, and that's across nearly 14 different industries. It's just the way I look at it. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of companies in Fiji, and as long as those companies are doing the back office procedures that our clients are wanting, then we can find the talent to do it. And that's been our approach to it. So, as long as we know the talent is there to be able to do the role, then we will go and source the team members for them. So yeah, for us, it's a real range of, like, we still, even with COVID happening in Australia, we still have a tourism client. But we've got construction, we've got property services, e-commerce. There's a whole bundle of different industries that are currently using our services.
Okay, fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that brings our event to an end. There were a couple more questions, but we'll handle them offline. So thank you so much, everyone, for giving up your time today. We will be sending around a short survey to get your thoughts, and would appreciate if you could answer that one. Finally, if anyone on this session is interested in more of a deep dive comparison into Fiji versus the Philippines, we are conducting another online event on that exact subject on September 9. So please reach out to me if you'd like to attend that one as well. Wishing everyone a wonderful day ahead. Thank you again to our sponsors and speakers. Stay safe, stay well, and see you next time.
Thank you, Sharon, and
Thanks, Sharon.
yeah,
Thanks all.
likewise.
Thank you.
It was great meeting everyone today.